Hello and welcome to our webinar for posted workers. My name is Riikka Mandelin and together with my colleague Anu Ikonen, we will tell you about the terms of employment for posted workers when working here in Finland. Before we get started, I'd like to share just a few practical issues. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be available in a few days of time on this address you now see on the slide. You can also find these presentations from the same website. If you have any questions, we are happy to answer them, but please use the chat for questions. So write your questions on the chat and we will also answer you there. You can also read the chat after the webinar, so you're free to focus now on the presentation. The questions and the answers will remain on the screen even after the presentation has ended. Today's webinar is meant especially for the posted workers. If you are listening now here as an employer's representative, please notice that we had a similar webinar earlier directed especially for the posting companies and employers, and you can watch that on our website if you wish. Now, why is the Occupational Safety and Health Authority having this sort of webinar? Well, we are the Finnish Labour Inspectorate, and as a regional governmental agencies, we serve both the employers and employees by giving them guidance in employment-related problems and matters. The inspectors, the OHS inspectors, supervise the employers and they do inspections at the workplaces. We also do inspections on the posting companies when workers are posted to Finland, and we also give guidance on the matters related to these posting situations. Today, in this webinar, me and Anu will tell you about the things you should know when you are working in Finland as a posted worker. Our goal is to share information so that every posted worker could make sure that they are treated fair at the workplace. We will start first with the short definition of what the term posting means in this context. Then we'll talk about the right to work, wages, working hours, right to have a holiday, occupational health care, accidents insurance, and also a few words about posting related inspections that we've done. And finally, we give some advices in the situations that one would have problems at the workplace. Me and Anu will be taking turns in presenting these slides. The definition of a posted worker is found at the Finnish legislation in the act called Act on Posting Workers. To make sure that you are this Posted Workers Act applies to your situation, it is good to know if you are a posted worker. This term posted worker means a person who normally works in another state than Finland, but temporarily comes to work in Finland because the foreign employer, meaning not a Finnish company, has made a contract of services. And behind these posting situations, there is either a subcontract, a temporary agency work contract, or intra-corporate transfer, and that is between these two companies, the posting company and the receiving company. But now I will give the turn for lawyer Anu Ikonen. Please, Anu.
Thank you, Riikka, and welcome on this webinar on my behalf also. The Finnish Act on Posting Workers tells you which part of our employment legislation is applicable to the posting situation. So they are mentioned, the parts of these acts mentioned here. These parts of our employment legislation concerns, for example, regulations of wages and other compensations, working hours, rest periods, documentation of working hours, occupational health care agreement, and accident insurance, and of course, safety and health in work. And then back to Riikka.
Okay, next some basic information about the right to work in Finland. It depends really on your situation whether you need a special permit to work in Finland or not. The European Union citizens may work here without a special permit. However, they must register their residence if they stay in Finland for more than 3 months of period, or more than 3 months time. And the same, of course, applies to the citizens from Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. But then citizens who come from countries outside the European Union, they usually need a residence permit or visa granting the right to work in Finland. This is the main rule. However, there are a few exceptions, and one of these exceptions is quite typical in the posting situations. This is when a non-European Union citizen comes to work in Finland as a posted temporary worker and is here temporarily and is a permanent employee of the posting company in the country where he or she is posted to Finland. If all the conditions in these situations are met, such a person can work for 90 days during a period of 180 days in Finland.
There is no minimum wage based on a law in Finland. In Finland, the grounds for determining wages and other components of wage, the method of calculating the salary, and the grounds for placing an employee in different salary grades are usually determined according to the collective agreement. And the minimum wage varies between different sectors because of our sectoral collective agreement system. Therefore, when determining the wages, one must always determine which collective agreement is applied in the sector you are working. You must be paid at least the mandatory salary items referred in the generally applicable collective agreement. However, if your employer is a member of an employer organization or has joined a collective agreement that is generally applicable in the sector you are working, the salary must be determined on the basis of this collective agreement. The employment conditions of temporary agency workers posted to Finland are determined in the same way as for Finnish temporary agency workers. If you are a posted agency worker, you must be paid at least the compensation determined in accordance with the collective agreement followed by the temporary agencies in Finland. Wage can be determined hourly, monthly, or task-based. Collective agreement may also include provisions of personal salary components or job-specific provisions on placement in different pay classes depending on how demanding one's work tasks are. Collective agreement may also include so-called scoring for placement in different pay classes, on which collective agreement generally provides instructions. Special attention must be given to the regulations related to working hours, such as any separate pay components related to working hours, for example, so-called compensation for shortened working hours and holiday compensation or working time balance allowance. Your employer should also pay additional bonuses for overtime work and Sunday work. Special allowances and remunerations to the posting, which are not paid paid for you as reimbursement of actual costs of being posted to Finland are considered as part of your salary. Daily allowances and so-called posting allowances, which are paid for the costs of being posted to Finland, are not considered as part of your salary. If the terms of your employment relationship doesn't specify whether these remunerations or allowances are paid for actual costs of posting, we are considering them as reimbursements, not as your salaries.
A few words about the collective agreement, since Anu already mentioned that mentioned about the collective agreements that are in a key role here when we talk about salary and many other working conditions here in Finland. The collective agreements are made between trade unions and employer unions. They are more specific than the Finnish employment legislation is, and they define the minimum terms and conditions in matters like pay and working hours, for instance. It's good to remember also that a collective agreement and your employment contract are two different things. Collective agreements are usually field specific. This means that, for example, building sector, transport sector, agricultural sector, they all have their own agreements. To find out the right level of wage on your field of work, you have to check the right collective agreement. Universally binding, or I think Anu used also the term generally applicable, referring to the same thing here. But these collective agreements that are universally binding are very common in Finland. If there is a universally binding collective agreement in the sector, then every employer on that sector must follow it. For example, the building sector has a universally binding collective agreement in force. And this means that all the companies in building sector that have employees, they must follow these conditions that are stipulated in the collective agreement. The universally binding collective agreement is also binding to those companies who post workers to Finland to that specific field, and especially in terms of wages. Collective agreements are available online on this website called finlex.fi. I believe you have a link on the slide here. Unfortunately, they are on those pages only in Finnish and Swedish, but some unions have translations available on their own sites. So it's good to check from the union's sites or web pages whether the translation is available there. Now, here is an example of how the minimum wages or the wages in such can be presented in the collective agreement. And this example is from the building sector. As you can see, in the building sector, the minimum wage of a new employee is smaller than one of the professional person's minimum wage. So the amount of the wage really depends on your experience in here. Another thing to notice also is that the collective agreements can have other mandatory parts of payment or parts of salary in addition to the hourly or to the monthly salary, like hourly in this case. And in this case, we have here the personal salary component in the blue box, which is in this particular collective agreement. Just to give you an example of the things to take into consideration when you are looking into the correct amount of salary. And to give you another example, we have example here of the wages on industrial sector to show how the minimum wages there can be once again can be presented in the collective agreement, and especially in this field of work. This shows that the right amount also depends on the job, as you see, and what are the requirements for that job. So it really can vary. This agreement for the industrial sector has also a mandatory part of salary called the individual wage element, and it is in addition to the job-specific wage. So just another example of how the things to look into in terms of the right amount of salary.
Yes, and then we move on to the travel and accommodation costs that are now mentioned in the Finnish Act of Posting Workers. The main rule is that the travel and accommodation costs are paid according to your home country's legislation or rules when traveling to Finland. However, if these costs are not paid at all, or the level of the compensation is significantly lower than the level for these compensations in Finland, your employer should pay for the costs according to our compensation level, which are based mainly on the collective agreements. During your posting in Finland, travel, accommodation and meals should be paid according to the provisions of Finnish collective agreement. So you have to be aware which collective agreement is only applied and then checked how these are reimbursed. These actual costs which are paid to you are not considered as your salary.
Then moving on to the issue of working hours. The normal working hours here in Finland are either 37.5 hours or 40 hours per week. The working hours of a specific field of work or specific sector are usually also written in the collective agreement of that field of work in question. And once again, you need to check your own field of work's collective agreement to know what are the normal working hours that you're supposed to be doing. The hours that you work in addition to these normal working hours or normal working time are overtime hours, and you are usually entitled to overtime pay for those hours. Every employee's all work hours also have to be recorded or saved in the working time records, and this is something that is the employer's obligation to do. It's important that your employer also plans your working time in advance so that you know when you are expected to be at work. And this sort of planning is done by working time schedule. This working time schedule, or you can also call it a work shifts or shift list, must always be provided by the employer. It is a document that the employer needs to give to employees in advance, so before the period that it is planning, that the planned period starts. The working time should be planned in this document for as far in the future as is possible, but at least for 1 week of time. This schedule must also be visible to the employees, and it concerns also every employee, even though we talk about shifts, this is not something that is also for those persons working in shifts, but every employee really at the workplace. The thing it should show is when the work time, the actual starting time, what time the work ends, and as well what time are the breaks. It's a good idea for you to keep a record of your own working hours also by writing them down. Writing down your daily starting and finishing times, for example, to your personal calendar. Because if later on you face some disagreements with your employer about your wages, for example, your own record might be really helpful in that case. The important thing for you as a posted worker is maybe to have an idea of how the working time in Finland can be organized, and this is why a few words about the average working time, since many companies nowadays use this average working time in organizing the working time. The Working Time Act does give this possibility to organize the working time so that it averages, meaning that it is in average 40 hours a week. And the maximum period of averaging it is 1 year, so 52 weeks. In practice, it means that you can have longer working days or weeks, meaning you can have longer working weeks and shorter working weeks, but during a longer period, the average of your weekly working time should be the same. And that is 40 hours in this case. This requires also a plan, and the plan is called adjustment scheme, which is done by the employer. The purpose of this adjustment scheme is to plan how the working time is adjusted to this weekly average of 40 hours. The adjustment scheme must be done so that it covers the period during which the regular working time is to adjust to the average provided or agreed. The maximum time for adjusting this weekly working time is 1 year. Well, as said, 52 weeks. But important here is to notice that when you work as a posted worker, this working time averaging must be done during the time you are posted here. Now, this is an example just to illustrate the thing I just told you about how the working time could be adjusted. And in this example, the adjustment period is a lot shorter than in the law itself. It is here 6 weeks, just to give you an idea that truly some weeks can be longer, but then some must be shorter in order to make it to the 40 hours week average. Also, your daily working time should not exceed 8 hours in this planning. So if you have those weeks of 45 hours a week, like we have here in the example, that means that the work is planned for 6 days in a week. And also, once again, you should notice that some collective agreements do have other provisions that should be noted in this case, but this was an example from the Working Time Act. To give you another example, this is from the building sector, because they do have other provisions regarding the average working time. In this case, the arrangement of working time this way, it requires an agreement at the workplace. And if this really is agreed, then here is the possibility to work maximum weekly working time up to 50 hours. as long as it is average 40 hours in a period of 6 months. And in some other fields of work, the adjustment period can be a lot less, and the weekly working time also. Another thing here to notice is that in the previous slide we had 40 hours a week in average, and here we have 38 hours a week in average when the reduction in working time is applied, which comes from this collective agreement also. So the different weekly working time is due to the reduction in working time, which is a field-specific agreement between unions and is not applied in all fields of work.
Then shortly about the annual holidays. If you work at least 14 days or 35 hours per month, you are entitled to annual leave according to the Finnish legislation. If your employment relationship has lasted less than a year, you will earn 2 annual leave holidays per month, and after the first year, you earn 2.5 leave days per month. The summer holiday season is between May and September, and the winter holiday season is between October and April. During your annual holiday, you are entitled to get holiday pay. This means that annual holiday is paid holiday, not without wage. If you don't get to keep your annual holiday, your employer must pay compensation for the earned annual leave holidays. For more information about annual holiday and different holiday payments, please check our website.
Then about occupational health care. Every employee is entitled, of course, to occupational health care, and this applies to posted workers also. You can ask your employer where your occupational health care is organized while you're working in Finland. Although the information of where it is organized should also be visible at your workplace, for example, on the notice board. Occupational health care includes preventative actions, but not necessarily medical care in case of sickness. So those are two different things. But you can read more about occupational health care also on our website.
And then we move on to the accident insurance. Finnish authorities supervises that employers have taken care about the accident insurances. A1 certificate covers accident insurance, but if you don't have an A1 certificate, employer must take the accident insurance from a Finnish insurance company. Foreign accident insurances are not accepted.
A few words about our inspections, especially from last year. We did over 200 inspections on posting companies, especially on posting companies on this slide now. Of course, these are inspections that are focusing on the employer and on employer's obligations. But I picked here some issues of the inspections, the issues where we found the most deficiencies that might be interesting. So here are the top 4. First, we have the notification on posting, and this is a notification that the employer needs to give to us, the OCHA authority, before the posting starts. Also, in salaries, we found some deficiencies. This can mean several things, but for example, that the salary was maybe not in the line, not in line with the universally binding collective agreement is one of the things that it could mean. Then the obligation to keep information available. That means that in many of our inspections, we found out that the employer had not kept available all the information that the Act on Posted Worker requires them to have available. And lastly, we have the working hours account, meaning that the working hours account were not kept according to the Working Time Act. Some more remarks on the inspections on posting companies. Well, I'd like to share with you that in Finland, everyone has the same rights and obligations at work. So same rules goes for foreign employers and employees as well as Finnish ones. Then discrimination at work is prohibited. Then another issue, the light entrepreneurs, that usually means that you are self-employed and invoice your customer through an invoicing service company. This is what it usually refers, this term light entrepreneur. But when you work, you are either an employee or self-employed. So it should be, or you should know which one you are before you signing a work contract. So that's, I guess, the message that we want to send here. Sometimes the light entrepreneurs position, the way it is in fact the same as employees, and then they should get the same treatment, for example, the same salary, overtime pay, holidays as all the other employees, and that's when it really starts to make a difference.
And then some remarks about what can you do if you have some issues during your posting period in Finland. One of the most important advice we can give is that write down your working hours, for example, in your calendar, as showed here. Write also down when you have been on breaks, because then you can calculate the actual working hours together. This can be very useful information, like Riikka said before, for example, in the case that your employer doesn't pay your salary correct. For example, if your employer hasn't paid you night shift compensation or overtime bonus, ask first your employer in written to correct the situation. And in these situations, it is very important that you have been writing down your working hours so that you can show the differences between paid salary and the working hours you have actually done. Note that your whole salary can be withheld because of a debt, not according to our legislation. And then if you are working on construction sector and you have not been paid for the minimum rate of pay, you can notify the construction site builder or the main contractor about this. After receiving your notification, the builder or the main contractor must immediately request your employer to provide a report on the wages paid to you and whether these comply with the regulations in Finland. We can advise you on how your wages should be paid and monitor if you have been, for example, discriminated in work life. But please note that we can't calculate your wages for you and we can't apply for missing wages, for example, overtime pay. In these matters, you can also contact the trade union if you are a member of a trade union here in Finland. Here you can find contact information of the local authorities and you choose the correct authority based on the working place you have been working here in Finland. From our telephone service, you can ask, for example, advices in matters related to employment contracts, payment, working hours, annual holidays, and other employment terms. You can call us anonymously without giving your information to us. Our inspectors answer your questions in English from Tuesday to Thursday from 9 to 12, and in Finnish and Swedish from Monday to Friday from 9 to 3.
We have also listed some useful web links for you to use in these slides. Well, first is our website, obviously referred to many times here in the presentation already. You can find there more information about employment relationships, working conditions, and occupational safety and health, obviously. But we also have a specific part where you can which is designated for matters related to posting in different languages. And you can find a lot of information about posting there. We also gathered there some links or links to some of the most common collective agreements in situations of posting. So I recommend you take a look at those web pages. Here you find some other useful web pages to different authorities here in Finland. For example, if you have an accident at work, you would need to contact the Workers' Compensation Center. Or in case you want to ask about taxation in Finland, here is a link to the tax office website. Now we seem to be moving fast and we have already come to an end of today's webinar. Here's once again the direct link to the presentations of today and to the recording, which will be there in a few days of time. Remember also that you can check out our earlier webinars if you already haven't done so. Thank you for my behalf and on Anu's behalf as well. Thank you all for watching today and listening to us, and I wish you have a nice evening. Bye-bye.